What is going on, guys? Welcome to another podcast episode. Today's guest is an amazing individual, so unique when it comes to the niche that he decided to master and study and become the go-to person for. It's intuition, right? When I heard about his studies on intuition, I was like, oh my God, we got to have this guy on the show. So I was saying to myself, before I have him on the show, I have to figure out, how do I tie this into building your brand and building your personal brand and becoming a better person and making better decisions in business. So we were able to talk offline a little bit and come up with the title, How Does Intuition Play, or how does it play into building your brand? So without further ado, I want to introduce speaker, podcaster, and expert in intuition, Sunil Godse. How are you, my friend?
I am doing amazing this morning. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited to talk about intuition and how it really is a key component before you start any kind of branding exercise.
Oh man, I love it. Sunil, give us a quick little background of what made you dive deep into intuition as your field of study.
So I wrote my first book called Fail Fast, Succeed Faster. And it was really about finding out why entrepreneurs failed. And if I can write a book on learning the lessons from how others failed, then, technically you shouldn't be failing because others have made that mistake, as long as you don't repeat them. So what I did is the one question I kept getting on stages whenever I used to talk about my book was, what's the one thing that entrepreneurs could do that could make sure that they don't fail? And of course, in my naivety, I said, well, there's a reason why I interviewed 300 people and there's 75 stories in the book. But when I went back to the podcast interviews to listen to what they said, the number one thing that 80 to 90% of them said was this version of, I didn't trust my intuition. I knew what I should have, I knew the decision I needed to make. And it was some version of that. So that got me interested in intuition. And then intuition came from when I was researching it, saying this is so critical in all these entrepreneurs' businesses and their personal lives. What is it? And when I researched it, it came from a spiritual perspective. But I said, okay, now if I'm writing a book for the masses, there's got to be research. And sure enough, there were MRIs, there were brain scans that I found, tons of articles on how intuition impacted people's lives and their businesses and perceptions and emotions and outcomes and revenues and profits and everything that everybody wants to know. But it all started with the seed of intuition. So when I look back at my life to see when I made a mistake because I ignored my intuition, the number one memory I have is when I had a friend reach out to me who was being stalked, and she wanted my advice. I was a personal coach at the time. Still am, but my intuition is saying meet with her that afternoon. And for some stupid reason, I said, let's wait 48 hours. Let's just wait for a couple of days. And that very next day, that same stalker walked up to her in a bus shelter and shot her in the head and killed her.
Oh my God.
And so that started one journey. And then I made a bad career choice to go into engineering. And I ended up in 3 years in engineering, hated it, loved the management aspect of it, but I was making 5 times more working part-time in a restaurant as an investor than I was in engineering. And then I got in bed with a client who the contract terms were changing. And I went down to Silicon Valley, and that client never paid me. So very key aspects of decisions that I absolutely knew what the right decisions were, and I ignored my intuition. And so that got me interested in saying, okay, what is it about intuition that people ignore? And I went back and I interviewed over 1,000 people, hired 2 film crews, went across Canada to figure out, why do people ignore intuition? And I came up with 2 reasons. One is intuition is incredibly complex. It acts very simply. So a really good analogy is, let's say you're in a car and you're buying a car. What you realistically want to do is you want to put the key in the ignition, turn it, and drive. You're not there to look under the hood and say, oh, look at this flywheel. Oh, take a look at this. Intuition does that. And it's 90% of, if you look at your brain, 90% is underwater like an iceberg, 10% is above. The 90% underwater is the subconscious. That's where your intuition lives. So it acts simply, but it's very complex. And when you don't understand the complexity of your intuition, then you don't understand the signals that it puts out. And these signals are very important because they're very unique to you and I. We could both have a gut feeling or a voice in our head, but for you, that could be 3 decisions down, which means you've already made 2 bad decisions. For me, that could be my very first decision. And so I have to know, what are my basket of signals that are positive and negative? The positive ones are telling me this is where I need to go. The negatives ones are telling me you're making a bad decision. And so when you become an expert in kind of figuring out how your intuition works and these intuitive signals, then every decision that you make will always be the right one in every situation, because your intuition is never wrong.
Interesting. So would you say intuition is that gut feeling?
It is the gut feel. That's a very common term. And one of the scientific basis for that is because the gut is where most of the neurons reside. And I actually interviewed a neurologist who's a former client of mine to explain that. But there are times where he says, even the neurologist says, sometimes my patients will tell me something, and he says it's not in his gut, but he'll have to really rely on his patients, because if they think something's wrong, he has to believe that. He has to now use evidence-based medicine to figure out what they mean. But intuition is a huge part of his practice.
I see. Interesting. Okay. So let's tie this into building your brand. I get a lot of questions, a lot of times before my Brand Accelerator clients enroll into the program. The big question is, I have all these fragmented pieces in my business. I'm working so hard in the business, I'm not working on it, and I just don't know what to do next, right? Here's where I think intuition, if they knew how to use their intuition purposefully and intentionally, that question wouldn't arise, because they would know what to do. So my question to you is, how do we intentionally dial into our intuition for us to make better decisions? I know that's like a multi-million-dollar question, but I know that's what my audience is wanting me to ask.
So let's start with this. Intuition is a two-way street. So as much as we're going to make some intuitive decisions on what we're creating and what we really believe in our purpose is, the intuition of others is going to be looking at you to whether they believe what you are doing, whether the brand that you represent is actually you, whether the purpose that you're trying to tell people in either a video or copy or a website is actually what you mean. If there's even a slight disconnect, you've lost the person. And that's their intuition working. Intuition works in milliseconds, if not less. I mean, research can only measure in milliseconds. But the research has shown that intuition actually acts between milliseconds and 23 seconds before any decision or action is taken. So if you miss that chance of them even remotely coming into your circle, you've got about 23 seconds to convince them to click that button or to watch that video, because that's how fast their intuition is. So when it comes from a brand perspective, you really have to be really careful about making sure that what you're creating is what your purpose is. You're really passionate about that. You really believe in it. And that comes out in the copy. It comes out in how you appear on the camera. And even if you're camera shy, even if you're not sure, even if you're not sure about the copy, people can tell that, right? There's a baseline that their intuition is taking a look at. If you're naturally nervous, I'll use that as a baseline. It's what detracts from that baseline that tells me you're actually not following your purpose. I can tell that you're gone. And then I go to your competitor, right? And then if that competitor is now has that purpose and everything that I believe, that's where I'm going to spend my hard-earned time, my hard-earned dollars. So it's really important to do that right at the very start. And I'll give you 3 case studies. One case study is someone who was building a personal brand for himself, and he ended up becoming a professional artist. Now, this is a person who lost his girlfriend. She committed suicide. He became suicidal. And eventually, he ended up tapping into his intuition. And what happened was his purpose came out in his art. And within 1 month, he had no artistic ability whatsoever. His intuition got him to pick up a set of paintbrushes. And within 1 month, he did a Marilyn Monroe picture that sold for $6,000 in 1 month. And because everything was flowing into his art, and people could feel that. And now he's a very successful artist there. If you look at a small business person, we can pick someone who's a real estate person. She was in the real estate game for 2 years, single mother, 2 kids, eating craft dinner every single day for 2 years. That's just the real estate game, until she realized that she wasn't being who she was. She was being inauthentic. She was using other people's sales message. She was using what other people were telling her what to do. But when she came down to who she was and how she wanted to represent herself to her clients, then they believed her, because before they picked up on her energy and it was off. And so everybody would say, yeah, come show my house, but they would never contact her again. The moment that switch came on, where she was so comfortable with herself, and now this is someone who looks like she's 16, has tattoos, and so she's not the typical middle-aged, and I'm generalizing here, middle-aged real estate person, but she had to get over being comfortable herself. That's when she went from zero to the time that we connected was $250,000. She's now making about $400,000 a year in real estate. And if I looked at a corporate level, there was a company that I came in to help, and they were flailing. They were about $500,000 in revenues. The CEOs, there were two co-CEOs, they were spending their time licking, stamps and putting it on envelopes when they weren't even working on the business. And so the first thing that I did when they hired me to save their business was build trust. They didn't have any trust. So this is a company that was tanking in terms of their revenues. The first thing I did was I took everybody's salary on the frontline people and I increased it by 25%. Because those were the people that were there. They were the blood, they were the sweat, they were the tears for that business. They were in the healthcare space. So they were dealing with patients all the time. They were the ones responsible for making sure the patients came to us so that we can service their healthcare needs. And after that went from 500,000 to, we ended up getting to 3.5 million in 2.5 years. We ended up the sixth fastest growing company in 2005. We made it on the Profit 50s. It was a magazine at the time in Canada, the hottest list, and all based on trust, right? And that trust comes from making those intuitive decisions that if your revenues are tanking, who would think that you increase your cost by 25%? But they were responsible for making sure that whatever programs I wanted to put in place from an expansion perspective, they were the ones that were going to roll it out with vigor because they trusted me that I had their back. And so that's where the intuition comes in, is feeling, treating people, knowing what your purpose is. And that brand is what is the people's persona is when they work with you, right? Very much like you, Henry, when people want to work with you, they're going to sense who you are through your podcast, through what you put out, the way you speak, even your Instagram stuff is how you deal with clients. People are watching you, even though you don't even know it. And they're forming that thing based on their intuition, saying, I trust this fellow, therefore I'm going to put my 50K in his hands because I know he's going to do me good because of who he is.
So, oh man, I love the case studies, by the way. So it gives everybody a real life, behind the scenes look on how intuition can actually transform you.
Right.
I was just on your podcast a couple days ago, and you were asking me some great questions. And I remember the question you asked me about, buying that car I shouldn't have bought.
Yeah.
Right. And man, it brought me back to, it actually fast forwarded. So I was listening to or watching a podcast with Ed Milet and Gabrielle Reese. Okay. I don't know if you guys remember Gabrielle Reese, but she's an athlete, super successful. Man, Ed asked her a question about decision making or something like that. And she said this that stuck with me so much. She goes, I don't think she used the exact words, but she goes, I don't have the balls to go against the universe. And I feel like when you are going against your intuition, you're going against the universe. And the universe is a hell of a lot stronger and powerful than you, right? And so when you're making decisions and your intuition is trying to speak to you, right? Is there some signs that pop up that, there's a sign, right? Because I think if my audience could just be vigilant of this and be aware of these signs, after a while, they're going to build up a muscle, their intuition muscle, and they're going to be able to leverage those signs and make better decisions. So could you tell me what some of those signs may be?
Yeah, absolutely. And because these are really individual, So I'll have your listeners and watchers go through a bit of an exercise, and this may take some time, and this is something you can do later. But if you think back to one of the worst decisions that you've made, where you actually knew what the right decision was, what did it feel in that moment? And normally, any kind of sign that intuition gives you that's a negative one is an uncomfortable one. So for some people, it's an angst, but there are people that have gotten migraine headaches, people who've gotten rashes on their bodies, and it's just manifested that way. Some people have seen signs, like signs appear for numbers, things that they see that are associated with negative events, and they become sort of common. Whether you believe that or not, it all depends on how far you take your belief system. But regardless, it is, what did it feel at that moment? And generally, every single negative decision that you make is going to be an uncomfortable one. What you do is from there, sit with it a day later, think back to that decision. What was the decision before that? What was the decision before that? And pretty soon what happens is you're going to start getting that first inkling of a negative signal. And so for me, for example, it's going to be like when I'm looking at somebody and I'm looking for trust and the trust is broken, my eyebrows cross a little bit like this. Oh. And it happens naturally. And so that's my intuition saying, what I just heard is not resonating with what I just saw. What I just read is not resonating with that person's brand. You've lost my trust, or you're saying something inconsistent that maybe I kind of trust you, let's bring you in the circle. Then I can see whether there's a connection. The other thing is, maybe you have got me trusted, but something changes. Maybe you got me in your inner circle, and I've certainly seen this. I've had a couple of people I've followed for a while, and then something changes where they followed somebody else's marketing copy or what have you, and I saw it, and it was disingenuous, and I lost it. I'm gone, because to me, in my thought, I'm saying he or she sold out. Right? He or she is not being authentic. I'm not going to spend my time there, right? And so we also have to think about opportunity cost. So when you're getting a bad signal, which you take a look at, it's not just making that decision going against that back. So you're actually ignoring your intuition to get into a situation where you're spending time, money, or writing copy, let's say, for example, but you could be spending that same time doing the right things the right way. So your opportunity cost is actually 2 times what you think. It's not just making the bad decision, but it could be the good decision that you are making. And so it's double the waste. Wow. So it's really taking a look at those signals. Now, for many people, trusting intuition is about the positive. It's openness. It's a pull, the dots connecting. So when you're looking at a brand, what you believe, what you're creating, those dots have to connect, because if they connect for you and it's your purpose, that's going to naturally draw people in. And when they naturally draw people in because they're taking a look at you, that's when you have that these are intuitive moments for not only you, but also for them. And now you have a trusted relationship that's going to take you down that hole that you want them to take them deeper into what you're doing, so that eventually they'll become a customer of yours.
I love it. Wow. This is so insightful. I think that we don't pay enough attention to our intuition. And I think that's where we make the wrong decision. That's where we get ourselves in pickles.
Yes, and it's there's a whole bunch of reasons. Nobody's really dove too deep into this, but it's really the signals that people, they get it, they've understood it, but the problem is they don't listen to it. And there's 4 intuitive hurdles that I talk about that really squash your ability to listen to your intuition. The biggest one is fear, fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of failure. What if? So your intuition is signaling that you got to take a left, but all these what if scenarios come in. And if you, let's say you overcome that fear, there's 3 others. One is ego. Ego is being narcissistic or following the herd. So societal norms, following other people's advice who don't really care for you, right? They're there and they're armchair wannabes or entrepreneurs are ones that I also look at, where entrepreneurs are listening, people who've never run a business before. There's also that being way too emotional. Relationships are this, where you know what the right decision is, but I have a really good friendship with this. I trust that person. I really like that copy and this and that. But emotionally you're so involved, but your intuition is saying, cut that relationship. And so these are some of the battles. And the fourth one is being too rational, which is exactly opposite to being too emotional. And again, this is where societal norms come in. This is what you should do, but it's not meant for you. And so each one of those times, these intuitive signals are trying to get out to tell you, no, don't make that decision, but you're ignoring them. And so this is where you have to pay attention to those signals, because if you don't know that they're there, now you're going down a rabbit hole, and you're wasting time, money, effort, whatever you're wasting, 2 times the cost, right? As I said before.
Wow. It's funny. I have a tight little knit inner circle that I connect with on a weekly basis.
Right.
And just to get my thoughts out, just to get, these are hungry, motivated business owners, solopreneurs, that we just connect with on a value level. We met through a group or whatever. And so I had my call with we call them peak performance partners, with one of my PPPs yesterday. And I'm having this conversation with him, and he's like, Henry, I'm hearing conflicting messages. Right. And I was like, please tell me, because I am inside the bottle right now. I cannot see this. And he says to me, Henry, you're saying one thing, but you're doing something else. Why aren't you? Why is this vicious loop happening all the time? It's like something triggers you, and you switch, and then you build yourself back up, and then something triggers you and you switch. Why can't you handle that trigger? And basically what it was there is still a part of me, okay, no matter how Jersey I get sometimes, there's still a part of me that is concerned about what other people think. Mm-hmm. I have my wife telling me, Henry, you own a business, you can't just say anything you want. That could come back and bite you in the ass months later, years later, right? I have a cousin who says the same thing, and I'm saying to myself, and when I get that feedback, I feel like a trapped lion.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like a ravenous lion trapped in a cage that can't get out. And that bothers me. It bothers me a lot. So there's times where I've held back, and I think that my audience picks up on that. Mm-hmm. Just like you said.
Yep.
And I could tell you where I've been the most impactful, or felt the most impactful, or posts or videos that have gone, I'm not going to say viral, but have gotten a lot of exposure and a lot of engagement, was when I was true to myself and I just said it the way I wanted to say it, without any concern, right? And so what my intuition was telling me then was, Henry, when you are out of alignment with yourself, you're out of alignment with your audience.
Yes.
When you're true to self, you're true to your audience. Which one do they appreciate more, do you think?
Absolutely. And one of the examples you were giving earlier, and in fact, we talked about this on my podcast interview with you, was getting trapped in external motivations, where the motivation should be intrinsic or for your purpose. And so the issue with your car, when you got the fancy watch, the fancy car, you're doing it to impress others, say, look at me, look at me. But everybody else is saying, yeah, I'm looking at you, but there's a disconnect, and there's no way I'm giving you even $1 from my pocket, because you're being you're fake.
Yeah.
But the time that you mentioned you bought a truck, it was just like that. You knew that was the right time that you needed a truck. And the time that you did buy a fancy car, the next time around, you sat for 5 minutes with the contract in front of you. That's something I call an intuitive medium. So whenever you're making any intuitive decision, especially the hard ones, you have to go to an environment where you can cut out the noise and sit and think with that decision. For you, it was comfortable in that 5 minutes. You asked the salesperson to leave. And at that time, you're listening to your intuition saying, is this the right move or not? And within 5 minutes, you said no, right? And so you can translate that to any really important business decision that you're making, any important brand decision that you're making. Does this, and we'll talk about branding here, does what I'm doing, does it resonate with my brand? And if you can't figure it out, sit back and think about it. If you need to talk to experts like you to confirm it, absolutely, because you're a trusted partner in that journey to making a brand really successful. So spend time cutting out the noise, talk to people like yourself, and sit with your intuition and say, what signal is this telling me? If it's an even remotely negative signal, you're going against what your brand is, what you're putting out there, what your purpose is, and because that's what people will believe.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're disconnected, they're gone.
Yeah, and the feedback that I got from my peak performance partner yesterday was after the call, he actually messaged me on Facebook with a voice message, and he said, "Henry, I encourage you." He said to me, "I got a chance to see two perspectives of Henry today: the therapist Henry and the Jersey Henry." Right? The Jersey Henry is the guy that does what it takes and will do whatever it takes. Therapist Henry is more of a listener, and will guide you by questioning to the right decision, right? And he said to me, "Henry, I got to see both sides today, like literally next to each other, you know." And he said, "You should embrace both. You don't have to be one or the other, because they're both very powerful entities, and you should appreciate that you even have those two types of I don't want to say personalities, but two types of traits in one person." And he said, "Henry, I'm encouraging you to lean in and appreciating both, so that you can, because when you don't have to be one or the other. And I can promise you that your clients and your family members and your friends, they're going to love you for embracing both." And man, I listened to that over and over and over again yesterday. And it was just such a breath of fresh air. It was like really calming, because I was like, man, I'm trying to, I want to be the Jersey Henry is what makes me stand out from everybody else that does what I do. Right. But I feel like sometimes it's too much. It's not polished enough. Like my wife will always tell me, you're not polished enough. If you want to attract a high quality client, you have to be polished. And I'm saying to myself, I don't know if that's necessarily true, because I have some great clients, some really high quality clients, pay top dollar. They're awesome to work with, like successful human beings. And I wouldn't necessarily call them polished. I would probably call them more edgy than polished.
Yeah, and again, polished is you're pandering to the other people, right? Polished means like when you're not yourself. I can take a look. Like when I first heard your podcast interview, actually, with Steve Sims, and Steve is so he had a great interview with you. I went and saw what your brand was about. Immediately, I knew you were top tier class. I hadn't heard your voice outside of Steve Sims' podcast and you relating your story. I'm looking at your branding. I'm looking at who you are. I'm looking at, there's a trust factor there. Within milliseconds, I said, yep, this is somebody I trust. He knows what he's doing. He's not a shyster. He's not a charlatan. So even before you even talk to me or even say anything, I've got that in my mind. That's the power of intuition. So I'm sure I can be sharper in what I say. I can be a little bit bolder. One of the things I did a TEDx speech, and I was very emotional on stage, and my wife was saying you were too emotional, but that was me, right? I was really. Sometimes I get really irritated when people don't take action, right? Like the tool of intuition's right there for you. And there's a statistic I even share with you in a room full of 25,000 people where they're all having their hands saying, I want to change. Only one of them changes. And that frustrates me because we have this tool that you don't have to really pay for it. It's you're already born with it and you don't want to use it. And so that emotion came out on the stage, and that emotion is actually one of the biggest compliments I get when people look at the TEDx speech is they love that emotion that I came out with because that was me.
Yeah. I get that way too on stage. You've spoken on way more stages than I have. But I get very emotional because I don't know. It's like looking into the people's eyes, and I could see how focused they are on me. And I know that what I'm saying is sinking in, and that touches me. Like that makes me feel something in my heart that like not a lot of people could do that. Not a lot of people could stand up in front of a crowd of people and be so vulnerable and be so truthful. I think if you're going to build a brand from here on out, because technology is advancing so fast and everything is coming out so fast and everybody's jumping online now because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't leverage your intuition to let you know what you do and say and how you align your brand to the truth of what you do, you're going to be in hot water.
Absolutely. And your intuition starts before any behavior or action or decision that you make. It is the starting point. So you have to get that right. Yeah. Otherwise, everything's out of alignment. And when everything's out of alignment, I, as a potential customer, know that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Put yourself in the sales position. You've gone to a car dealership or you've gone to somewhere where you're buying something expensive, a house.
Yeah.
Right. And you're talking to a realtor and they just say that one thing. Right. And it's just like, I'm out of here.
Yes.
It's happened to me a million times.
Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned that a lot in this show. And so when you get that sign, I don't want you to ignore it. And that's what Sunil's saying. Don't ignore it because it's going to come back and bite you in the ass.
Absolutely.
Right? I'll leave you with this, guys, and then we'll get into how you can learn more about Sunil. And what I tell my clients before they come on board, because I'm not cheap, okay, is this. I said the clients that get the best results from me and this program are the ones that trust who they hire and hire who they trust. Period. If you don't feel that now, then we will part ways, shake hands, and I wish you the best of luck. But there's no way that I would ever want you to invest in something of this magnitude and not trust your decision. And I am dead honest with them because we're talking 100+ hours here of work. You know, we're talking about a brand here that's going to go on to make you hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're not confident in this decision here, it's gonna play out later on. And I don't want you to make that same mistake that a lot of people do. They go in and then they're like, oh shit, why am I here? I shouldn't have done this. Oh, my back is, and then now you start to make poor decisions moving forward when you should have listened to your intuition in the first place. So I want to leave you guys with that before we get into the next part of the show, which Sunil, I was on your website this morning and I was just like glued to the videos and all the content that you have on your site. Where can people learn more about you and intuition? And perhaps they might want to hire you to get more deep into how do they leverage their intuition to make better decisions and grow business?
Absolutely. So I'm all on the socials. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can go to intuitionology.com. I've got a free course that gets you right into really tapping in and understanding the complex nature of intuition I talked about, understanding your signals. And then from there, there's a bunch of courses you can pay for. I'm also doing personal and business coaching. So you can always DM me on one of the socials or my phone number should be on the website somewhere. Get in contact with me. It's all based on timing. How quickly do you want to ramp that up? It's based on you. But the first thing is to start, see if you trust me. If you trust me and what I've done and the work I put in, which is a lot of hours in research and interviews, then take the next step, take the free course. It's all up to you, right? It has to be intuitive that you want to work with me to make sure that you make the right decisions in every situation, bar none.
Oh, I love it. Sunil, what a pleasure to have such energy on this show.
Thank you.
Like, I love your energy. I'm a big energy guy. I'm not woo-woo by any means, right, but I pick up on energy fast. And there's something about you, dude, that when I was on your show, I really appreciated. I mean, guys, I'm telling you right now, if you ever go on this guy's podcast, he researches you deeper than the FBI. Right? I think Sunil's got stuff on me that the FBI doesn't have on me.
but I do have that tagline at the bottom. I do not sell any of the material, right?
I got to tell you, I mean, this guy does his homework, right? And I was listening to one of his podcasts this morning. It was Sam Bakhtiar. He was on our show not too long ago. And Sam said the same thing. He said, you know things about me that I don't know about me.
Absolutely.
I thought that was very impressive, and it
Thank
just
you.
it shows your character and shows how dedicated you are to, you know, your expertise and your industry. And I think you're going to, you have changed many lives. I've seen the testimonials on your site, but you're going to go on to really impact a lot of people in the future. And I wish you nothing but the most success in the world, because we need more Sunils in the world to help people get a better understanding of themselves so that they can go on and create a life, a business, a brand, you know, that they're really proud of. So Sunil, thanks for spending 35 minutes with us today. I went a little over, but I had to have you on the show. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
There you have it, guys. Another show in the books. Hope you enjoyed it. When you see me on social media, drop me a DM or shoot me an email. Let me know what the biggest takeaway was from this particular episode. And if you guys are watching this live, drop in the comments later on in the replay, you know, what was your biggest takeaway from this conversation? I hope it provided value, and I hope it gave you a little bit of a different perspective on how to leverage your intuition to make right decisions when you're building your brand and in your personal life. So have an amazing day, guys, and I'll catch you on the next episode real soon. Take care.